Warlords, dictators, coups, revolution, massacres. If you're looking to understand the modern-day conflict over Taiwan, this is the kind of history that you have to be prepared for. The story of contemporary China is one fraught with some of the most interesting, and perhaps some of the darkest, characters and events of the 20th century. Characters and events that many haven't even heard of. We'll be focusing on the man who, after 2 decades of dictatorial rule over China, was forced to flee to the island of Taiwan by the rising Chinese Communist Party. For better or worse, he laid the building blocks of the Taiwan we know today. This is the story of Chiang Kai-shek, the man who lost China. The China of the early 1920s was a country engulfed by chaos. China's last dynasty, the Qing, had let out its dying breath less than a decade ago, and since then, the country had shattered, with its multitude of regions under the control of provincial warlords. These warlords were ruthless tyrants, each vying for more power and control than the last. This dismal state of affairs was a far cry from the lofty ideals of the revolutionaries who did the unthinkable in overthrowing a system of governance which had defined China for nearly 4 millennia. During the days of the revolution, one man towered above all as the figurehead of the Revolutionary Alliance. Sun Yat-sen is revered as a hero in both the mainland and Taiwan to this day. In Taiwan as the father of the modern Chinese nation, and in mainland China as the forerunner of the revolution. At this time, though, Sun was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The revolution against the Qing dynasty was not a wholly unified movement as the later communist revolution would be, and since the revolution, Sun had lost a lot of support, in large part due to his close ties with Japan and willingness to sacrifice territorial sovereignty to them, particularly in China's northernmost region of Manchuria. Despite seeing Japan as a natural ally and his belief that collaboration with the Japanese would help China modernize, many at this time viewed him as a sellout who was feeding into Japan's imperialist schemes. Nevertheless, Sun had a fiercely devoted group of loyalists, and during this period he heavily relied on those closest to him. Enter one Chiang Kai-shek, a young man who, after serving as a regimental commander in Shanghai during the revolution, was making his way up the chain of command. But how did Chiang become a revolutionary in the first place? Born in the city of Ningbo, Chiang was fascinated in his youth by China's great scholar generals. These men of the past emphasized self-understanding as the key to moral action, and it's likely these principles, rooted in China's tradition of Confucianism, resonated with the young Chiang, as he struggled with the dark aspects of his personality. He was prone to fits of anger, and was easily irritated by those who did not meet his standards. Increasingly, he gravitated towards a military career, and was especially inspired to join China's Republican Revolutionary Movement when he witnessed the defeat of a major European power, Russia, at the hands of Japan in 1905. This event proved that an Asian power could take down the supposedly invincible Westerners. Chiang left China for Tokyo, Japan at the age of 18, and after going back and forth a bit, returned to China for good at the age of 24. He left imbued with a new sense of military discipline and unbreakable loyalty to the revolutionary cause and its leader, Sun Yat-sen. Sun was infuriated by the state of the country. This is not what the revolution was fought for. Sun's dream was a modern Chinese nation, which emphasized his 3 people's principles: nationalism, democracy, and the people's livelihood. Sun saw nationalism as critical towards helping China expel the imperialist powers of the West, democracy as essential in giving the people of China a voice, and the people's livelihood, often translated as socialism, as key in addressing the inadequacies of capitalism. At present, none of this was even close to coming true, and something had to be done. Sun's Revolutionary Alliance, now known as the Kuomintang, or KMT for short, was not dead, but in the age of warlords, its power was confined to the south, in Guangdong province, in the city of Canton. Amidst this chaos emerged a glimmer of hope for the struggling Kuomintang. Sun had been approached by an agent of the Soviet Union to discuss cooperation between the Soviets and the KMT. Sun was over the moon, as he had long sought to secure foreign aid from any foreign power. The Soviet proposal was conditional, though. They wanted Sun's KMT to form a united front with the recently formed upstart group known as the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, which at this point had only 123 members. Today, that number is about 96 million. But we're not quite there yet. Sun agreed to permit CCP members to join the KMT as a minority group, but not an equal party. The Soviets agreed, believing that the KMT could lend the small CCP some much-needed credibility. And so came Chiang's biggest mission yet. Sun selected Chiang to lead a KMT trip to the Soviet Union to study the country's systems and military. Chiang himself did not agree with all of Russia's principles, but the Soviets' ardent anti-imperialism and military structure did appeal to him. With newfound Russian aid, Sun founded the Whampoa Military Academy, and Chiang became the head of the school for training military officers, providing him a large base of support in the military. Crucially, this would allow him to consolidate his own power later. Tragedy struck when in 1925, Sun Yat-sen died suddenly of cancer at only 58 years old. Many in the party favored Chiang as his successor, due to his image as a fiercely loyal supporter of Sun and the party's most skilled military commander. He was precisely the kind of man needed for the mission the KMT would soon need to undertake, that being the Northern Expedition, which sought to reunify a country fractured by warlords. But Chiang was not the only contender. His chief opponent in the coming power struggle was a man by the name of Wang Jingwei, the newly elected head of the party and the head of the KMT's left wing. Chiang began to grow increasingly paranoid as he sensed his power might be in danger. This paranoia was not unfounded. The Soviets viewed Chiang as a man who, when push came to shove, would not implement the sort of policies that they wanted to see take hold in China. This rift only grew as Chiang made clear that he planned to launch the Northern Expedition ahead of schedule. All this came to a head in March of 1926. The Zhongshan, a Revolutionary Army gunboat manned by the CCP, appeared off the coast of Whampoa Island, and Chiang interpreted it as a clear sign that there was a plot to kidnap him. After Wang called Chiang twice that day to ask about his schedule, Chiang decided he had to take action, and placed the entire city of Canton under martial law. He arrested the captain of the boat and 50 other communists. Ultimately, although he let most of the communists go, this was a coup, and the KMT Executive Committee, welcoming restrictions on Soviet influence, named Chiang Supreme Commander of the party, and the commander of the Northern Expedition, and Wang was forced to flee abroad for the time being. Once the Revolutionary Army had reached Shanghai and Chiang continued to amass power, tensions between the communists and Chiang began to bubble up to the surface once again. With the Northern Expedition looking likely to succeed, and concerned over the possibility of a military dictatorship under Chiang, the left-wing faction of the government, which had also grown in power, attempted to curb Chiang's growing influence by placing him under the authority of a newly created military council, reinstating Wang Jingwei, and issuing a secret warrant for Chiang's arrest. In response, Chiang resolved to purge the party of communists for good, in one of the darkest parts of his legacy. During his days in Shanghai, Chiang had formed connections with the criminal underworld of the city, in particular, a group known as the Green Gang. Chiang paid off the group to destroy the communist presence in the party, and taking the CCP by surprise, his forces gunned down members of the Communist Party indiscriminately, killing around 5,000 to 10,000 people. Blood ran through the streets of Shanghai, thousands dead because they dared to disagree with Chiang. This murderous scheme all but cemented his grip on power. Chiang may not have realized it at the time, but the Shanghai massacre sealed his ultimate fate. The CCP would never forgive him for the events of 1927, and though it had incurred serious damage, the communist movement was not dead. For now, the decimated party would retreat into the countryside and plan their next move. More pressingly, Chiang's purge of the CCP split the KMT in two, with Chiang establishing a government in Nanjing, which would become the capital of nationalist China, and Wang in control of the government in Wuhan. Firmly in the leftist camp, Wang's government put out a reward for Chiang's capture or assassination, but only had a fragile grasp on power in the provinces of Hunan, Hubei, and Jiangxi. Support for Wang waned as the CCP created chaos in the countryside, killing landowners and wealthier farmers. As a CCP leader and later paramount ruler of China, Mao Zedong remarked, "A revolution is not a dinner party, but an act of violence by which one class overthrows another." In Mao's view, at least, a brief period of terror in every rural area was necessary. As a result of these horrifying killings in the countryside, even Wang's government turned on the CCP, orchestrating communist purges of its own, violence begetting more violence. The Soviets were flabbergasted. Nothing had gone according to plan, and things were falling apart fast. The KMT's Russian advisors fled the country, but Stalin's government remained committed towards providing financial and material support to what remained of the decimated party. Chiang sought reconciliation with Wang's government, but Wang refused to agree to anything until Chiang resigned. In a calculated move, Chiang did just that, retreating to a monastery to contemplate and meditate. The truth is, he fully expected to come back and finish out the northern expedition, but he was biding his time. During this brief retirement, an important development would occur. Chiang would marry Sung Mei-ling. Sung Mei-ling came from a powerful family in China. She had been educated in the United States, was fluent in English, and was by all accounts more intelligent and sophisticated than her husband. During World War II, Sung Mei-ling would prove to be an integral part of Chinese-US relations and fostered a close relationship with the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Over their honeymoon, Chiang was called back by an embarrassed Wang Jingwei to resume the northern expedition, ending his very brief retirement. During Chiang's absence, Wang's KMT had struggled to support itself financially, as Shanghai's bankers and capitalists were no longer under pressure from the Green Gang to funnel money toward the party. Once again, Wang left the country, leaving Chiang in control of the party. Upon Chiang's return, he enlisted his new brother-in-law, TV Sung, as the KMT's Minister of Finance, which began to stabilize the financial situation. Chiang cobbled together alliances with two major warlords to finally retake the historic capital of China, Beijing. Currently, the warlord in charge of the region of Manchuria was stationed in the city, Zheng Zhoulin, also known as the Old Marshal. Chiang and his allies pushed north to Shandong province, and it seemed victory was all but assured as the northern expedition continued. But in the north loomed a threat which had been growing steadily for decades. The Japan of today is a drastically different country than the Japan of the early to mid-20th century. At this time, Japan was full steam ahead on its colonization projects, and had a significant presence in China's northern regions. Chiang's forces marched upon the Shandong city of Jinan only to encounter 500 Japanese troops guarding the 2,000 Japanese civilians in the city. Chiang demanded that the Japanese withdraw, but within a few days, a brutal battle began, and both sides committed heinous atrocities. Japan called in reinforcements, and Chiang's troops were forced to move west of the city. Despite having spent much of his youth in Japan, Chiang vowed from then on to write in his diary every day a new way of killing the Japanese. So much for that meditation retreat. With Chiang and company now on their way to Beijing, Zheng Zhoulin was in panic mode. Tokyo, who had considerable sway over Manchuria and by extension the Old Marshal, promised that if the general retreated to Mukden, Manchuria's major city center, Japanese forces would prevent Chiang and his allies from crossing into Manchuria. But as he approached the city by train car, Zheng was blown to smithereens by a bomb which had been planted by Japanese officers in the region. The officers who killed the warlord were acting on their own accord, without Tokyo's permission, hoping to trigger a conflict which would allow Japan to further consolidate their power in the region. But that time would not come yet. Instead, Chiang's allies occupied Beijing as planned, and an unexpected ally arose in the north. Zhang Shuilong, also known as the Young Marshal, was the newly fatherless warlord of Manchuria, and he was not happy with Japan. By the end of 1928, Zhang pledged allegiance to Chiang's national government, and the flag of the new republic flew from China's southernmost province to its northernmost. Chiang had finally consolidated control over the mainland and fulfilled part of the dream of Sun Yat-sen, but his grip over the country was tenuous. Despite the conclusion of the northern expedition, Chiang's China was still an incredibly unstable country. The Kuomintang was running on a constant budget deficit, and undefeated threats to Chiang's power still abounded. Wang Jingwei, the CCP, and looming above all, the growing Japanese Empire. I wish I could say that the constant warfare and the suffering of the ordinary Chinese people concluded here, but by all measures, it was only about to get worse.